This prompts a question that I would like to ask you.
Okay.
If you could live in any time period, what would it be?
Any time period throughout all of history?
Yeah.
Like human history or history in general?
History.
That's a good question. Like live permanently? The question. Okay, here's the thing. Here's the thing. You can't really approach this.
It's just an easy question.
It's not. It's not an easy question. It's a hypothetical, and it has to have conditions. So in this hypothetical, you have to establish A, is it a one way trip? Is it a return journey? B, how long are we staying for? C, are we taking anything with us? Any creature comforts? Is there anything that, if we're going to the future, we won't need them, maybe, depending on how far in the future. But if we're going to the past, will we have toilet paper? Stuff like that. You got to think about this stuff before you throw a hypothetical
toilet paper?
out there.
You're worried about toilet paper.
No, that's just a thing, that comes up, because toilet paper wasn't a...
Let me rephrase the question.
Yes.
If you could be born, and if you could live, and if you could die in any time period, what would that period of time be?
Nerdy, unqualified, and probably indistinguishable from rambling. Welcome to the A&D Show.
Hello and welcome to a very special bonus episode of the A&D Show. I'm David, and we have a very special guest with us, recurring guest. He's been on the show before. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome or a distant and cold welcome to the one, the only, Corey Feldman.
Hello. Thank you for having me again.
Actually, his name is Corey Hayes.
Yeah. Who is Corey Feldman, by the way?
He's a child actor from the 80s.
Really?
He was in The Goonies.
Oh, we talked about that last time.
Yeah, we did.
I don't care for The Goonies.
For those of you who are just joining us for season 2, or maybe you're just finding the podcast, Corey is a veteran with the A&D Show. He joined us on our Squatch hunting adventure podcast episode.
We went squatching.
Yeah, we went squatch hunting.
That was fun.
It's been a hot minute. What was that? Season 1, episode 10 or something like that?
It's been a rather cold minute. I don't know if you stepped outside lately, but it's frigid.
Rather brisk.
Very freezing.
But
that was... I don't remember exactly when it was, but...
I think it was around episode 10 of season 1. So if you are just now listening to this and you want to catch up on that conversation, go back season 1, episode 10-ish area. It's called We Went Squatch Hunting, and check out the episode where Corey and I talk about our Sasquatch hunting adventure.
That was fun.
That was a lot of fun. It was good times. But for today, we have it's a special bonus episode just for you guys, our listeners. And if you notice, Austin is not here.
No.
Sadly.
I miss that guy.
Yeah, I mean, next time we do one of these bonus episodes, you should just come to Studio 4 or Studio 3, where we normally record.
Isn't Studio 3 like his house?
Nobody's supposed to know that. Gosh. Studio 4 is my house. So it's literally one of the two houses.
It's pretty easy to piece together because one night he literally said, hang on, I have to say goodnight to my daughter. And then he said, good night, honey. You could hear him turn around and say, good night, honey.
on our latest episode, which was automotive technology, which just released a few days ago, you can actually hear his daughter in the background say goodnight to him.
You can usually hear the dogs like sniffing around too. It's great. It's funny.
And most of the time you can hear me sniffling around because I'm allergic to his dogs.
Yeah.
But
that's fun.
But anyway, so Austin is not here with us. He's at home with his family. But, I made a special trip out to Studio 5 here in St. Louis.
Which is now my home.
Which is now Corey's home. So, here we are, just recording just a little bonus episode to throw out there for you guys. And we thought that we would talk about something that is pressing and futuristic and has the potential to be a doozy of a conversation.
Yeah.
And that being the future of weapons technology.
And it's a conversation, that has a chance to be a doozy, but it also could be a dud because we haven't had this conversation before.
No, we haven't.
We started having it and you were just like... Whoa. Shut up.
Well, for our listeners, that's pretty commonplace. Austin and I have talked several times about how we'll start talking about something, and then we're like, whoa, hold on. We got to stop. We got to save this conversation for the podcast. So case in point of what we're doing here. But I thought it was an interesting thought, an interesting line of thought, and so I thought we would just chat it out here while we have a few minutes. So
futuristic,
the future, the past, present, and future of weapons technology. Now, let's take a quick time travel adventure through the history of weapons tech. Right.
Right.
So weapons were originally just rock. Right.
Sticks.
Cain killed Abel with a rock.
Right. Yep.
And then it advanced to more like tools, right? Mm-hmm. Where people were creating like cultivational tools and sharpening their edges to make them into weaponry. And then you got the Bronze Age where people started creating weapons out of more hardened metals. And then you've got the medieval times when they made big swords and sharpened edges and big broadswords and battle axes. And then fast forward and you've got the implementation of firearms in like the early 1700s.
Right. This prompts a question that I would like to ask you.
Okay.
If you could live in any time period, what would it be?
Any time period throughout all of history?
Yeah.
Like human history or history in general?
History.
That's a good question. Like live permanently? The question. Okay, here's the thing. Here's the thing. You can't really approach this.
It's just an easy question.
It's not. It's not an easy question. It's a hypothetical, and it has to have conditions. So in this hypothetical, you have to establish A, is it a one way trip? Is it a return journey? B, how long are we staying for? C, are we taking anything with us? Any creature comforts? Is there anything that, if we're going to the future, we won't need them, maybe, depending on how far in the future. But if we're going to the past, will we have toilet paper? Stuff like that. You got to think about this stuff before you throw a hypothetical
toilet paper.
out there.
You're worried about toilet paper.
No, that's just a thing, that comes up, because toilet paper wasn't a.
Let me rephrase the question.
Yes.
If you could be born, and if you could live, and if you could die in any time period, what would that period of time be?
Now, see,
this isn't you transporting from one time to another.
This is not a time travel scenario.
No, you're not leaving as David Kennedy with all the knowledge that you have right now into another era of time. You are being born, you are living, and you are dying in that time.
Now, see, there's the fallacy with your hypothetical there. That fallacy is I wouldn't have any understanding of me being in that time. I wouldn't have any retrospective ideals about that time period.
Okay, what time period looks most attractive to you?
Okay, well, are we talking about... Oh, my God. Are we talking about, probably the 50s?
Okay. Was that so hard?
Listen, I'm trying to teach you how to ask hypotheticals, okay? This is a learning experience for you.
It was pretty simple. I've asked the question 1,500 times. I've never had that kind of answer.
That's the nature of the A&D show.
For me...
Welcome to the show.
For me, if I could live in any time period, it would probably be like the medieval age.
Mistake.
I would probably die of some horrible disease.
Dysentery.
I'm fine with that.
Dysentery? You die of dysentery.
Yeah, I'd be fine with that.
You know what dysentery is?
Not precisely.
Diarrhea.
Yeah, I'd be fine with that.
You would literally poop yourself to death.
Here's the thing. I'm kind of infatuated with the idea of going out in this ornate, unique kind of way. And if that was how it went, that's how it went,
That's not unique.
I also...
or ornate.
I also have...
It's just disgusting.
I also kind of like the idea of dying and my body just being given back to the earth. Like just animals just scavenging my body. I'm okay with that. I'm at peace with that.
There is a way, even in modern society, you can do that, where you can have your body turned into mulch and wrapped around a tree seed in a pod that then is given to your family, and then they plant it in the ground, and your remains fertilize a seed of a tree, and it grows into a tree.
You're making this way too emotional. I'm talking about just going out into the woods, laying there, and just letting rats chew on my dead corpse.
That took a turn for dark real fast.
I think I'd be at peace with that. Speaking of weaponry, going back to our... You're just looking at me. Speaking of weaponry, did you know, I was looking up the other day, this is kind of weird, don't ask me why, but I was looking up the other day with my friend Levi about different ways of torture, like through time, that people, how, the Inquisition and all things.
I have one question for you.
Why? Don't ask me why. But people used to, and this is no joke, they would take a bowl in medieval times. They would take a bowl and they would put rats in this bowl. And
I've heard about this.
Yeah, and they wouldn't have a bottom in the bowl, and they would put this like this grate on top of the bowl, and they would put hot coals on top of that grate to where the rats were trying to get away from the hot coals, and they would literally just eat it.
Burrow through the stomach of the person.
Yes, or the chest.
Yeah.
Oh, crazy.
Now that we've turned a dark corner on Conversation Street.
I think I would be okay with that, too.
Oh, jeez. So anyway, going back to our lineage of weapons technology.
Right.
So you've got the medieval age, you know,
Great time.
and then you've got the early revolutionary stage of expressly muzzle loading rifles and pistols and stuff, piratey kind of stuff, you know. And then you've got fast forward to like
Muzzle loading doesn't really make sense, but that's okay.
What do you mean?
Muzzle loading.
They load the weapon through the muzzle of the gun.
Okay. Wait. I was thinking. No, you're right. You're talking about packing gunpowder at the end with a pipe. That's not what I was thinking. You're right. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Like a hand cannon.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then you teach you to second guess me. I'm a learned man.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean. I wasn't thinking.
And then you've got the, you know, in the 1800s era, you've got the repeater rifle makes its entry.
Right. Gatling gun.
Yeah, and then you fast forward into the early 1900s, and you've got revolvers that make their entry there. And then you fast forward through into, you know, the World War I, World War II era, and you've got machine guns and 50 calibers and grenades and claymores. Sniper rifles, tanks, all these kinds of things. Mass destruction. And then you fast forward even beyond that, and you start to notice a trend. You start to notice this technology that started out very elementary, right?
All right.
And it starts to become more technological and more advanced.
Towards biochemical weapons.
And then, exactly. And it becomes more massively destructive, right? You know, a simple, what started out as a simple rock ended up by the 70s and 80s as a howitzer that's got a 20 millimeter cannon on it that can shoot a hole through 16 buildings or something crazy like that. You know, with 2-inch thick steel armor that can't be pierced by anything but a specialized piece of weaponry, right? And then you fast forward beyond that, and you've got, you know, Harrier jets, and you've got F-22 Raptors that, if I remember correctly, I think it was the Harrier that was a jet that could take off and landing, and it was just like the most technologically advanced flight weapon vehicle.
Well, and now they're making these pods that literally just launch straight off the ground and can land straight on the ground. There is no real takeoff anymore, you know, and I'm not talking about a rocket that, you know, takes a while to build up and then slowly launches off the ground. No, we're just talking about just a complete vertical, just leap off the ground, which once you think about it, that's pretty incredible.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the technological advancement's impressive.
I think the G-force would make you poop your pants, but
yeah, G-forces do wreak havoc on the colon for sure. But the question, I think, then is, you know, that's where we are now, right? We're at this season of human existence of unprecedented technological advancement, and we talked a little bit about this in the automotive regard on the last episode with Austin. But the question then is, what predictions, based on the history of technological advancement within the weaponry realm, what kind of predictions do we have for the future? I've got a few ideas, but I'd like to hear yours first.
Okay, well, I sit here and I think about it for a second. Like Teddy Roosevelt said, it's going to get historic. Teddy Roosevelt said, the more we know about our past, the better prepared we are for the future. I think that if you look at history, even though as we have evolved over time in a sense when it comes to weaponry, I think that we will probably in ways repeat ourselves. Look at the Spanish conquistador, Hernan Cortez. How did he get rid of all those Indians? He infected them with a disease. You know, he knew that the Indians were dying because of the disease that the Spanish carried and were immune to at a time. So he opened these Indians up to these diseases, and I mean that's biochemical weaponry.
Yeah,
in a sense. And I mean, I think that's kind of where we're at, the precipice right now.
Biowarfare.
Is biowarfare.
Well, when you look at pop culture and you look at pop culture's pretty blatant prediction about what the future of weaponry is, or the present threat, I guess you could say.
Right.
Almost every, and you can correct me if you know of some that are not this way, but almost every movie or television series or book that's out now has something to do with some kind of biochemical warfare.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, look at some massive popular successes over the last, let's just say 10 years, right? You've got The Passage, which is a fairly recent book series and a very recent television series that's about basically biochemical warfare.
Right.
You've got the Maze Runner trilogy, which is almost exclusively biochemical. Now, it's not necessarily warfare. I think it was biochemical disaster stuff, but they're using biochemical warfare against it.
Right.
Then you've got, other series and other television shows and things like that most of your future, look at the Planet of the Apes, the most recent trilogy. The entirety of humanity almost was wiped out by accidental, though still biochemical warfare. And so, I mean, I think there's precedent for that. I think that I don't think you're wrong by any means based on our society's interpretation, I guess you could say. I have a little bit different view, but I don't want to interrupt too much more.
Well, here's what I was going to make. I think that you're going to see biochemical warfare take on a new shape, even as a micromanaged kind of level, as to where I was driving through this town in Alabama one time, and you know how like certain places throughout the globe geographically have different kind of vegetation patterns. Like you can recognize, when you're driving through Missouri, you can recognize when you're driving through Illinois because it's flat as junk and there's nothing. That's Illinois. But I was driving through this place in Alabama, and it was weird because I noticed like all the trees and the vegetation completely changed shape and changed form, like just like that. And I asked the person I was with, and I don't remember exactly the explanation, but it was like this certain type of dogwood tree was exposed from some planter into the area, and it was a species of vegetation that didn't belong in that ecosystem.
And it was a virulent species that took over.
And it took over all those other trees. And I think that that's kind of what you might see in warfare is on a very microscopic level, dropping insects that like have no place being in the ecosystem that we're trying to infect or we're trying to take over, or the enemies we're sitting in behind enemy lines. An insect or a plant that will literally wipe out a whole population one day just because we have the power to biodegrade it into a new kind of weapon.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely precedent for that. In fact, there are historical things like that throughout recent human history. For example, there is a creeping vine that was natural to Sri Lanka, something or other, one of those island chains or something over there in the Asian Sea, Pacific Ocean area by Japan and China.
Right.
And they found that it was A, appealing to the eye, and B, great for reconstitution of loose soil, right? And they, because basically what it is, it's a very, very fast growing weed vine that has deep roots and really compact soil. And so they actually harvested some of this plant from this area over in just Japan area, and they brought it back to certain areas of the United States and took it out of its normal ecology and introduced it into the United States ecology where there weren't any predators or creatures that would feast on that plant.
Yeah.
And they introduced it into certain areas in, I want to say in like Mississippi and that kind of southern area. Or no, Mississippi and some of the Atlantic states, southern Atlantic states, South Carolina, that area. And what they did was they planted these seedlings and these little clips of whatever those plants were. And what they didn't anticipate, it had exactly the effect that they wanted it to have. Yeah. It firmed up the soil, the terra firma. It brought in fresh greenery and it brought in fresh life, and it really cleaned up and it looked beautiful. But what they didn't anticipate was the fact that they had taken what was actually a predatory plant out of its natural ecological environment, and away from its natural predators, other animals and plants that would eat it and hold it at bay, introduced it into an ecology that did not have those natural restrictions, and it didn't just thrive, it overwhelmed.
Right.
And there were whole cities and whole communities that are now just overrun with this creeping vine that's just taken over.
Yep. And that's kind of how I see weaponry, and it's weaponry of the future. It's not really flashy. It's not really, sexy. It's not like some nuclear war bomb that's going to come drop on all of us, which I ultimately might be even more realistically be the future with the way, the world leaders have tempers now. But that's a whole nother...
Not to put too fine a point on it.
Yeah, that's a whole nother subject of discussion. But I don't know. That's kind of how I see the future of it. I think this is a little bit different topic. I think that we're much closer to invisibility cloaks than what people realize.
This sounds like it's getting dangerously close to conspiracy theory here.
I think that, well, I love a good conspiracy.
Do explain. I'm interested.
I mean, I don't necessarily have any hard evidence. I haven't broken to a CIA lab. It was like invisibility, that didn't happen.
You haven't seen any personless footprints showing up on the ground around you?
No. There's so much advancement in the way of camouflage that there's no way that we're not at least circulating the idea. And it's probably not going to be there's not going to be some shirt that you put on that ultimately adapts to the, just being invisible. You can walk around. But there's probably a more specific technological idea of camouflage to where the clothes that you're wearing, almost like a chameleon, can just kind of take the coat of what is around you. Yeah. And in turn make you invisible to the naked eye.
Interestingly enough, I just read a book. We talked about it a couple episodes ago, not at length, but just as a quick reference. I just read the book The Lost World by Michael Crichton, the one that the second, third, fourth, fifth, and now sixth movies were based on.
Yeah.
Of the Jurassic Park series.
Right.
And I read that book, and one of the very intense scenes in that book was to do with adaptive camouflage from a biological perspective.
Yeah.
And that was, there were a couple of, I think there were Carnotaurus, kind of like tiny T-Rexes, that had the ability to adaptively camouflage themselves perfectly to their environment.
And there's just no way that kind of DNA exists in the world, and
that there's not some kind of technological way to duplicate it.
Yeah, and there's no way that the government isn't looking into it. They've had to be for a while.
Well, I think one of the things I think is interesting when it comes to the relative impact of pop culture on actual technological advancement. I think whenever you look historically, you've got these creative minds that, I don't want to say predict, but they create some kind of just off-the-cuff wild idea as science fiction. And it actually spawns human technological advancement to push toward that goal. And what they end up with oftentimes, if not always, is dramatically different than what that person created in their concept. But it does actually push them to a level of technological advancement pursuit that gets them to a level of technology. For example, Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek, many of the concepts that he just kind of, I'm sure it was intentional, but many of the concepts that he wrote into his book about the technology of that world, that universe, are now being pursued as possible options for space travel. Same with Andy Weir, the writer of the book The Martian that spawned the movie of the same name. The technology that he fabricated from his own creative mind is now being explored as a potential possibility for traveling to Mars, and other things like that. And it's one of the things that I think that is interesting is the same happens with weaponry, right? Yeah. Flying cars. Back to the Future made many not predictions, but they made many assertions about what the future could look like. Many of those things
They were wrong about the hoverboard.
Yes, sadly. Not for lack of trying, though. But many of those things were pursued, the hoverboard included, were pursued retroactively, right? They created this idea that spawned creativity to create that future. And I think the same is possible, and this is where my idea about the future of warfare comes into play. You mentioned, not on the podcast, but earlier in conversation, you mentioned the possibility of psychological warfare.
Yes, that's interesting. Ooh.
Which is an interesting thought.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about it is, though, whenever you talk about psychological warfare, you're talking about it as like playing on the emotions of people, playing on the psychosis of people, potentially, that kind of thing, right? Where you're talking about maybe even introducing into them some kind of bioagent that causes psychosis that then you can play on them even more effectively. But I have a thought that also stems from another book that I've just read a few weeks ago called Ready Player One. Have you seen the movie or read the book?
I have seen the movie. I was thoroughly impressed because I was not expecting that much when I put it in my DVD player, and then I was like, wow, this isn't half bad.
You watched it on a DVD player, so
Blu-ray, whatever.
Even still, Blu-ray. Get with the program. Streaming is all the rage now. I don't know if you realize that.
Okay.
Publicly shaming you right now. I'm just kidding. No, so here's the thing. Ready Player One is another example of an author writing technology, fake technology, fictional technology into a novel that has garnered critical acclaim, has been made into a fairly successful movie, and has pretty much world renown, right? What it's actually done is it has actually inspired engineers and technological developers to create the technology as close as they can to what's in that film. For example, I was talking with Kenneth, another frequent guest on this show, about this just a few days ago. Also a sponsor of the show. Anyway, talking with him about this because they actually, I saw a video on YouTube the other day where the host of that video was an engineer, and he had heard about a haptic glove development project that was underway and had actually had some breakthroughs and some success and had developed a fully functional haptic glove. Now, for those of you that don't know what a haptic glove is literally exactly what it sounds like. A glove, but it has to do with haptics. Basically, it helps you feel things that aren't actually there. For example, anybody that has an iPhone that's iPhone 7 or newer, or between iPhone 7 and iPhone 8, because the iPhone 10 doesn't have this, but iPhone 7 and 8, one of the big changes, and maybe with the 6S too, I don't know about that one, but the iPhone 7 and iPhone 8, one of the biggest changes was they took away the home button. It's no longer a home button. It's literally just an actual sensor.
Ticked me off the first time I opened my 10. I was like, I don't know how to work this thing because it was not there.
Right. But see, the 7 and 8 have the home button sensor area, but it's not an actual button. It's just a piece of glass that's set into your phone a little bit, but there is a haptic feedback vibration motor built into your phone that whenever it senses a certain level of pressure on that button, quote unquote, it'll actually give a vibration clicking feel to make you feel like you're pushing a button. It's fake feeling, basically. It's a haptic feeling.
What?
And and it's, are you trying it on your phone right now?
Yeah, I'm sitting here doing it. I've never even noticed it until...
It's a fake button feel, but
I feel tricked by the government.
It tricks your brain into actually feeling like you're pushing a button,
it's
even
like
though you're not.
phantom limb.
Exactly.
Oh my God.
So haptic gloves are that exact technology on a full hand scale. Imagine the amount of haptic feedback you would need to have for you to wear a glove and be able to touch and feel things, pick things up in a virtual environment, and it feel real, and your brain register that you're touching a physical object.
That's crazy.
Right?
That's crazy.
These engineers have actually developed that technology and are working diligently to make it a reality, a usable reality. Of course, in the context that they're looking at it for, it's being considered as a virtual reality gaming technology to add to the virtual headset kind of stuff, which is very much in line with Ready Player One. My thoughts with that paired with the future of warfare is, what if the future of warfare is not physical battlegrounds with weapons killing real people?
It won't be.
But what if it's a pairing of virtual reality with psychological warfare, but only in a virtual world, but that has physical repercussions on the person in the virtual controller? Here's another piece of technology that's also in development, also from Ready Player One. In the movie, when you watch the film, and in the book too, if you were to read the book, he actually gets a full body haptic suit. So the same principle as the haptic glove, or the same principle as the haptic feedback on your phone, making you feel like you're clicking a button, but your entire body in a wetsuit, that type thing that you plug in, and you can feel when somebody taps you in the shoulder, or if somebody shoots you with a gun, you feel it. Now, in the game, or in the game, within the book and the movie, and anything within a virtual reality gaming scenario, it would be limited significantly such that it wouldn't actually
feel like you're getting shot in the heart when you're getting shot in the heart.
Yeah, but it's basically just for a physical feedback, so that you feel it, and it's just adds to another level of realism for the game, right?
Yeah.
I also saw another film that played on the same system where they wore haptic feedback body armor, and they're playing like a Call of Duty search and seizure through clearing a building kind of a game, right? Yeah. And they had to go level to level, and they had headsets on, and they could see. And one of the things that was cool about the film was that if they got shot in a part of their body on the suit would actually pierce them.
What do you mean? Like it would actually stab them?
It would stab them.
That's just
to make them actually sustain the injury that the virtual game had shown them sustain.
That's morbid.
So then the question is, okay, well, what if we take the Ready Player One idea and the technology that's being developed based on that inspiration, and then we look at the possibility of that as a physically damaging potential, and then you end up with, well, in the future, what if we have entire wars that are fought not in the real world, but in a virtual world, and people actually die because the haptic suits will actually physically kill them?
Well, here's the problem with that is because the people that would be getting put in the haptic suits would be the same people making the haptic suit. So if I was a higher up in the government, I wouldn't make a haptic suit that would kill one of my soldiers.
Well, what if they did it this way? What if they had it set up and they basically came out with a non-lethal warfare system where all these battles are fought in a virtual world, and it actually doesn't cost any life. But then at some point, somebody figures out that with the right key code, you could actually unlock the safety protocols on these haptic suits. And when you shoot somebody in the virtual world, that haptic suit would actually kill them.
See, at that point,
That's espionage.
At that point, I would just get a real gun. I would fly across whatever sea I need to fly across, and I would just shoot somebody.
But see, at that point in human history, were human history to advance to that point, you would basically be at an all-time high level of world peace, right? And then war would only be a war game scenario. Think about, have you ever seen Ender's Game? The movie Ender's Game?
No.
That's a good example. If anybody's seen the movie Ender's Game, if we haven't, here's a general principle of it. They are training kids from the ages of, 14 to 19 or whatever, to be war commanders because their brains are younger and more malleable, and that whole bit about them being more open to suggestion and open to free thinking. Right? So they're training them. They're putting through all this wartime training against a, quote, fictional enemy of these space bug things or whatever, kind of like in Starship Troopers. And what happens is they are basically fighting these battles and commanding fake troops, virtual reality troops, against a virtual reality enemy. And spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the end of the movie and you don't want to hear the end of it, turn this part off. But
then turn it back on because
basically,
we need to hear the rest of this.
What happens in the end is these kids fight this massive virtual, quote-unquote, battle, And then in the end, you find out it was actually them commanding real troops in a real wartime scenario. They just were under the false assumption that it was virtual. Right? Then you would basically be in a scenario like I'm talking about where people are under the impression that this, quote, war game scenario that's basically just a way of people settling their disputes like two brothers who are arguing about who's best at Call of Duty, fighting each other via an Xbox or a PS4, and they're fighting against each other country to country in a virtual reality under the assumption that it's non-lethal and non-destructive, but then somebody has sabotaged that system and created a workaround of the safety protocols wherein whole armies of people die on both sides, and it creates this massive
Here's what I like about your scenario is the fact that, you know, when you think about soldiers and when you think about warriors, you think of big burly men with jawlines sculpted by the Greek gods and everything.
Right.
But in your scenario,
it could be literally anybody.
The best warrior is probably either some like really old fat guy who's been living in his mom's basement for 40 years, or either that or like this little kid. And you know, it's funny when you think about it.
Yeah.
You know, this little 14-year-old kid being the best warrior in the world.
But it's also a pretty harrowing thought because at that point in history, this fake futuristic history, anybody could be a warrior. And because of the potential for the corruption of that system, anybody could be at risk of death. No matter how old, young, no matter what gender, no matter what societal standing, could be at risk of their life coming to an end abruptly by accident.
I mean, if you really think about it, this sounds like a somewhat of an impossible theory, but we're a lot closer to that kind of stuff than we may realize. I mean, PlayStation's come out with their virtual reality gaming already, and it has been out for a while. Right. And I don't know if you've ever done that, but I've played some zombie games on that virtual reality thing, and I become legitimately afraid for my life. Like I know that when the zombie gets close to me, I'm not actually going to die, but in that moment, I
certainly feel like
feel like I'm going to die. And I when he strikes me and the whole camera goes and just shakes all over the place, I feel like I've been hit.
Yeah,
you know, and
it's like your brain is connecting you physically to something that's never meant for you to be physically feeling.
And it showed me something about myself. I learned of something about myself because I always thought that in the case of a zombie apocalypse, I would be this like awesome macho man with all these guns,
much
running
to your
around.
own chagrin.
I'm a little scared girl that cries as soon as a zombie gets near me.
Well, that's a perfect segue, Corey. Actually, to a break for our sponsors.
How is that?
Did you know, Corey? Did you know that we have a website? The A&D Show has a website. Let me tell you, AANDDSHOW.com. Also, AANDshow.com.
AANDD.
No. AAND. It's A and then and spelled out and then D. Show. Don't make this more complicated than it has to be.
I'm sorry. I won't interrupt.
ANDshow.com, which was proudly given to us by Wix.com, which is our sponsor. And they have generously sponsored our show and given us a free website. And let me give you just a quick rundown. I don't know if you've ever had the need personally for a website, Corey, but Wix.com is the source for websites. And I'll tell you why. They have thousands of professionally designed templates that are free to use, and you can pick one, apply it to your website, fill in your own content, put your own pictures, put your own products, whatever it is that you're putting on for your website, all just with the click of a button. It's that simple. It took me a maximum of 2 hours, and that was with me developing a lot of graphic content for our website, and I was able to have a fully functional website from the go, and the best part about it is you can start your website for free. You don't even have to pay a dime. And should you decide that you want to go ahead and get a custom domain and pay the monthly premium, you're looking at $14 a month for your regular monthly, and you have one of the best, most responsive, greatest looking, professionally developed websites you can have for minimal cost. And that is from Wix.com. So thank you, Wix. And now back to the podcast. All right. So we've been talking about the future of warfare, the future of weaponry, technology, and how it's going to play, make an impact, and how really, truthfully, how pop culture is and has made an impact on the future of warfare technology, weaponry, and so on. And it's been quite an in-depth conversation. Unfortunately, I think we're out of time to discuss it any further. So, listeners, if you liked this podcast, this bonus episode, please give us some feedback. Show Corey some love. One of my best friends, my brother, and I'm glad to have him on the show. Thank you for being here, Corey, taking this time out of your busy week to spend some time for our listeners and to have a great conversation. And it's been good. And if you guys want to hear this topic discussed a little bit further, Austin and I can pick this conversation. We can have Corey come back. Just give us some feedback. We'd love to hear from you. Check us out on Instagram at ad.showofficial on Instagram. Check us on Facebook, The A&D Show, on YouTube at The A&D Show. Check out our YouTube videos. And from here until all of eternity, I don't really know where I'm going with this at this point.
If you like the idea of being ravaged by wild animals when you die in the woods, kind of like I do,
it's just
show some love.
Oh, gosh. To whom? To you for your psychopathic ideas about being chewed on after
Shout
you're
out
dead?
to the A&D Show. Just comment all up and down that mug about how you... Don't say how you'd like to die. Don't do that.
Yeah, don't give us any ideas about how you... No, we don't want to know that.
This is a light post. We need this is happy times.
We need to end on a high note.
Right.
You know what's really tasty? Pickles.
Let's go get some pickles.
Let's go get some pickles.
Let's go get some pickles.
We'll be right back.